Hello and welcome everyone to the ISM Rochester Lunch and Learn webinar series. I'm glad you were able to join us today. Our speaker for today is going to be Jane Tierney, who will be speaking on dealing with shortages and disruptions. And what have we had this past year? It's been a year. So I'm glad to welcome Jane to the program. Please be sure to ask any questions using our chat function, or if you have any comments, please put that in there as well. And we will be recording this and sending out the recording a little later today. Now on to the presentation. Welcome back, Jane. She is the founder of her company, Purplelink. She's sharing with clients a better way to obtain value through the supply chain. Jane is an engineer. She has her MBA, Greenbelt, CPSM, and CPSD certifications. In addition to running her business, she teaches operations and supply chain management courses in the California State University system and serves on the advisory board for the Operations and Supply Chain Management. Several years ago, she co-founded the Southern California SCRM Council for local executives focused on supply chain risk management, and they host an annual supply chain risk symposium. Jane is a speaker, author, and she offers her monthly webinars and conducts various workshops on different topics. So at this time, I'm going to turn the program over to you, Jane.
Thanks, Kathy, and thank you, ISM Rochester, for the opportunity to be here with you today. As Kathy said, disruptions and shortages are nothing new to the supply chain world, and we've had plenty of those throughout the last few years, and I don't expect 2025 to be much different. We always get surprises in that area. So let's just kind of dive right in and what we can do. I'm going to talk about some different types of disruptions that we experience in supply chains, the impacts from those, what you can do to prevent those and deal with those. And as my per usual, I'm going to do a raffle and some prizes. So you can email me now at jane@purplelink.co. And if you're not quite ready, I'll give you a chance at the end to do that. Just put ISM into the title. You don't have to add anything else. Just blank email with that. So I've got a way to count people and to award prizes. So let's dive right in. When I talk about a topic, I usually go to a dictionary and look up and see what does this word really mean. I've been a reader all my life, and I always have a dictionary very close to my desk when I'm working. And so we talk a lot about in supply chain, we talk about disruptions. And really, I thought I'm going to look that word up. So when I look it up in Webster's, it says to break apart, to disturb or interrupt. And when we talk about this, we talk about events causing an unplanned change in production, in sales, or in product distribution. These things can include natural disasters, regional conflicts, pandemics that we're all familiar with. And I talk about natural disasters as I sit here in California today. I am in Southern California, the Los Angeles area, not all that far geographically from Malibu, where there is a raging fire going on. We had one a couple weeks ago. A few years ago, we actually had one in our neighborhood and we were forced to evacuate. And so all these things happen, and we have to deal with those and make sure that we can handle all of these kinds of things in our businesses. And as supply chain professionals, our job is to keep an eye on these things and keep our businesses running as smoothly as we can. Disruptions also occur when we talk about software and things like that. And I like this definition because it talks about an external force acting upon a business's ability to produce, make, ship, sell products, all of those things. And a lot of times that's what we have, some kind of external force that we didn't expect, or an external force that maybe we knew was possible, like hurricanes and fires and things. And then stuff happens, right? We know that good suppliers can have issues. We know that trucks can break down. We know that lots of things can happen to keep products from getting where we planned to get them at the time frame we plan to do that. So we have to keep an eye on that as supply chain professionals. There's a lot of different types of disruptions which we experience in supply chain. And we let's look at some of these. I'll give you some examples. When we have demand that drops unexpectedly, we see a sudden increase. And then on the flip side of that, we see this sudden increase in demand. Things that don't necessarily, um, that haven't been anticipated. So we all know during the pandemic, things up and down and all around kind of stuff. So there were lots of different um, things in the last few years that have happened. Demand has changed in areas. So we had the chip shortage that we're still kind of dealing with the dregs of that. And that was caused by some inaccurate forecasting. It was also caused by a rebound from the pandemic, which some of the automobile companies didn't expect to happen as quickly. We're dealing with the move from fossil fuel vehicles to hybrids and EVs, and that's nobody seems to know what the right pace of that transformation is and how smoothly that's going to go. So there's a lot of that. We talk about productivity. Productivity we define strictly as output versus input. So the ratio of outputs to inputs. And sometimes that productivity will drop because our outputs suddenly don't get produced at the rate that we're used to, or it takes a lot more inputs to get them produced. So if we are looking at how much we produce over a given period of time, or our suppliers are able to do that, or our customers are trying to do that. So we're trying to balance that. I always tell my students, my college students that I teach, that in supply chain and operations, we are in the Goldilocks business. We're trying to find that just right sweet spot all the time. And it's not always easy. Sometimes we have too much, sometimes we don't have enough, and we're always trying to kind of balance and um, stay in that area. Kind of, we go from one extreme to the other. So we have a lot of issues. We had some pretty severe hurricanes in Florida this year. So we had some warehouse contamination. We had some damage from that. We had some shutdowns. Right now, like I say, here in Southern California, there's a lot of roads that are shut down because of the fire. So you can't get in and out of certain areas. And there's just a lot of things that can happen from day to day. We still have chips in short supply. There's a lot of things like lithium and wheat from the Russian-Ukraine area that were typically being produced that aren't now. Um, I read this week that they found a new gold mine or a new source of gold in China. So who knows what that will do to um, that commodity at gold if we find a lot more than we expected to find. I think they said that this could be the biggest gold mine ever discovered. So what will that do to availability and prices and whatever? We've just been through an election. We still have a transition um, from one president to another, from one political party to another. So there's a lot of things about that. And there's a lot of talk about and restriction to trade and a lot of different things. So the out all of these things are going on and these can cause disruptions. We can also have disruptions just from normal day-to-day business when, oops, something happened. The supplier didn't get the product done on time. They were too busy. We just went through a holiday here. We're getting into holiday season here in the United States, where a lot of companies shut down between Christmas and New Year's or shortly thereafter, or they have abnormal work schedules and abnormal demand. If you work in anything that has holiday demand, you've probably been pressed up to about now. And now, even though the shopping is kind of peaking, then if you haven't got the product to the place it needs to be bought, it's probably not going to happen. So there's just a lot of different things that can help. And then we always have quality issues. We have operator errors and things like that that can happen. So companies have a lot of challenges. We're Christmas here. We've got the Chinese New Year shortly thereafter, and that always causes disruptions. Chinese companies are shipping like crazy before that to get things here, and we've been ordering like crazy to get stuff on order so that it does get shipped before the Chinese New Year holiday over Asia. We call it the China. but it hits many, many different company or countries in Asia from that. So when we talk about disruptions, just from my babbling right here, you can tell that they're all over the place. We have all kinds of disruptions and we have things going on. But I want to give you a couple of dimension disruptions because not all disruptions are the same. Some are little blips and some are, pains, but some are very serious and some can bring you to your knees. So if you experience these material shortages that you've had in the past or you're dealing with right now, you understand that it's not only the number of disruptions that you're dealing with as a company or even the type of disruption shortage. You have to really look at that and say, what is the impact to me? What is the potential impact? And how do we find solutions and resolutions to these so that we can, again, get back up and running? Because it's about bouncing back. It's about that resilience. It's not saying that we're not going to have any issues. It's how fast can we bounce back from those issues. And we want to be able to use that analysis to lead us to better risk awareness and better mitigation strategies. To not allow history to repeat itself time and time again, we have to acknowledge that there are going to be disruptions. And we want to look for where is the potential for that? Where is the seed or the core for that? Not just wait for those to happen, but to really understand that in a risk-based thinking type of thing. So we have production stoppages, slowdowns, we have overtime crunches that we need to do, and unplanned schedule changes that come up for any number of reasons. We know that we have higher freight costs, higher material costs in some cases, delays in getting equipment or materials. We have those kinds of things. We have lost sales from extended stoppages or shortages. Product not being where it needs to be at the right time. Companies can lose market share where customers look at alternate brands or alternate products that are available. And companies suffer damage to their reputation and their brand because we are expected as companies to be able to be resilient and bounce back from all of those very quickly. And if we're not able to, that can have a negative effect on our customers. And if our customers aren't happy, then they start to shop elsewhere. So a lot of these, again, are blips, and some of them are very, very serious and deep. So we need to understand the difference and understand how we react to those because they don't all require the same response. So we've had some kinds of disruptions seen. Again, the COVID, we talk about that, and it's hard for me to say that it's almost 5 years ago. In March, it will be 5 years, but it still lingers, and there's still issues from that. We've had a couple of baby formula issues from different companies and different scares from that. Recently, there's been all kinds of food recalls. I don't remember the number I saw, but it's like over 20 some food recalls in the last couple of months, including some onion issues with people getting very sick from McDonald's and McDonald's discontinuing or suspending their quarter pounder sandwiches for a period of time, trying to figure out what was going on. We've had strikes. Last year was a big year for strikes, but we have a lot of that threat this year. Elongated lead times. This is one area where I used to say that lead times were fairly stable, but not anymore. They go all over the place, and we had some long lead times that just get longer. This Ukrainian issue and the issues in Israel and Gaza are impactful. Syria, with the things going on this week, we might say that's not really a big deal to us here in the United States. But if you start to peel that onion, you'll find out that there's lots and lots of layers there, lots of things involved, and lots of different countries that you might be more closely involved with. In Europe right now, they're going through a lot of different changes. France has a new, has an opening for a prime minister. Germany has some issues. There are the NATO implications and the Ukrainian unrest, that uncertainty and looking for help in those areas. All of those are customers, they are suppliers, they are um, partners in trade for a lot of companies. And so we have to look at all of that and say, how does that affect us? What is the impact? And then what can we do about it? Again, we've got a lot of things going on. We CEOs are always worried about losing their jobs. And this week we found out that they might need to be afraid about losing their lives. There's a horrible shooting that occurred, and CEOs have a lot on their plate anyway, but now there's more consternation and more nervousness about that due to the murder of the United Healthcare CEO um, in the street. Crazy kind of thing. So CEOs are worried about losing their jobs due to disruptions, due to supply chains, due to things that they can't predict. Um, 77% in this one study felt that there are actions that need to be done in the company to address disruptions, but they are not adequate. So they are doing things, but they feel like they're not doing enough. And if you're in one of those companies, you feel that pressure from the C-suite, but you may not know what else to do either about some of these things because they're just not easy answers. If they were easy answers, there it wouldn't be the same consternation and the same level of concern. More and more disruptions get escalated to the exec level a lot more quickly and they get a lot of people involved. I know when I was in the corporate world, it was rare that we had to go to the higher levels of management and talk about a disruption. Generally, I was in a mid-level management position. Generally, we solved those things at that level and kept that information contained enough. So it's not that we didn't share it that we were hiding it, but it didn't rise to the level of impact that we needed to alert a lot of the C-suites on some of these disruptions. It was, we had to do workarounds, we had to maybe work some overtime, do some expedited shipping, either into the company to get the produce, to get the products produced, or expedited shipping to customers to keep them happy, lots of different things. So what we found in this one study that was from Alex Partners is that disruptions were the number one concern of 69% of the CEOs. And that outranked things like hiring concerns, which has been an issue with unemployment being so low and still the talent pool being um, seemingly inadequate in a lot of ways. The IT network management, all the cyber issues, all the AI kinds of things, and the repercussions from COVID and other kinds of fallout from that are still happening. So lots of different things going on, and you have to look at that environment and kind of stay up and around on that. So these impacts that we experience um, from these variety of reasons, companies experience these shortages and disruptions, and if we don't learn to evaluate and manage these risks, don't anticipate them, then we get this thing from the blue. And I see this picture and remember picking it for this. But then I also think about this asteroid that they found that was very close to Earth very recently in the last couple of weeks. So we don't know what we don't know, and we're always uncovering things that are scary, like an asteroid very close to Earth, or a natural disaster like a fire that's raging here again close to me, or the hurricanes that smashed into Florida earlier this year. In supply chain, we talk about flexibility, agility, responsiveness, resilience, but we're often forced to deal with situations that are not really flexible, agile, or easy to maneuver. So we know things like sole sources can be risky, but we tend to manage those a little bit better because we know the risk is there. But we also have a lot of single sources, and these can be really devastating. I had a client um, who had done a sourcing activity recently, and the supplier that they just picked about 6 months after this sourcing activity started missing deliveries. And when they talked to the supplier, they said their supplier had a fire. So they just done this sourcing activity and they thought, well, okay, let's go back. We picked one source, single source, not a sole source, but a single source. We picked one of the 4 or 5 that participated. Let's go back to the second one and ask them if they can fill in and give us and give us some of the product that we need. So they went back to that second supplier and they said, nope, they were unable to help. They didn't have any excess capacity. They were having shortages as well. And when they explored this, they found out that all of their suppliers in the sourcing exercise relied on one sub-tier supplier and plant for the chemical that had the problem. And that chemical plant in China had experienced a severe fire, and there wasn't any source available anywhere. So, where they had what they thought was a single source issue, and they had multiple suppliers that they could get these products from, that they had just verified from their sourcing activity. Come to find out, there was a sole source at that tier 2 level, and they didn't even know about it. And I can't emphasize enough that one of the things that the pandemic did and has really emphasized, and I encourage all my clients to to do in their supply chains, is really look for the transparency, map out your supply chain, understand where your not only tier 1 suppliers are and what their situation is, but what are the tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers? We know that chip shortages have been an issue, and that's going to continue, I think, for a while. And we've got issues with Taiwan and China that could make exacerbate that at any time. And companies are a little worried about that. And so, and NVIDIA is going through all kinds of things. They're a very well-respected company. They are very much in demand in their chips, and there's lots of other chips right there too. And TSMC, if you don't know, makes a lot of those NVIDIA chips as well. So they're the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company is right in the heart of all of the chips. So we need to keep an eye on these things. And what we find is these surprises are often interrelated and have roots that go down. So we're as companies, as supply chain people, we are responsible for finding those things, understanding that, uncovering that, and then putting things in place so that if these things happen, and something will happen, that we don't get blindsided by it and that we don't get devastated by it. But it takes time and it takes resources to do the work and find these vulnerable areas. And you have to coach your people and you have to allow them time to go do this digging and work with their suppliers and find out and get this visibility in the supply chain that's so necessary. So we deal with these shortages and disruptions, and it's enough to deal with those in and of themselves, but they can reverberate through the supply chain and cause impacts from minor headaches to having to replace rejected lots of material through expediting, getting inside employees and suppliers to work overtime. So sometimes internal resources are used to sort on and even rework defective product. We have suppliers in my corporate experience. More often than I care to admit, had to call a supplier and say, you need to put a couple people on a plane to come here. We'll give you a place to work, but you got to rework these here. Your guys are going to have to do the sorting, and then you're going to have to tell us what's good. And then whatever's not, you're going to either have to rework it here or get it sent back to your factory, get it reworked and back to us as soon as possible. And in the meantime, I need you to make me some new product that's good and get that here as quickly as possible. So there's all of these things that we have to deal with as supply chain managers and losing that and not losing the time and the scheduling that we have so we don't let our customers down, because we know that issues that can start as minor can leave gaping holes. They're like sinkholes. Oh yeah, there's a little problem here, and then all of a sudden it's sucking in everything around it, and it's hurting your quarterly goals and even your potential annual goals. I've had suppliers that had capacity issues, and that caused some delays in shipments and extended lead times and some overtime and all that kind of stuff. And then you have personnel issues and you have material delays. And I've got this client spent time and resources traveling, trying to support that, sometimes 2 or 3 calls a week to track progress, strained relationships, and nobody likes to talk about things when relationships are strained, frustrated distributors. Um, the fourth quarter that we're in now is traditionally a big quarter for many businesses. If you're in the fiscal year, and even if you're not on January to December fiscal year, this quarter or this time period is often a big revenue generator. So companies can experience a lot of things very suddenly, and we have to deal with that. So one of the things we want to do is to make sure we can measure our impacts. So look at what our baseline is or what our plan was. And then if we have a production stoppage or slowdown, how does that affect us? Do we have idle time all of a sudden? Or do we have the lack of that? Do we have people in one area that are busy working overtime and people in maybe another production line that is standing around because they're waiting for material to come in or the machine to get fixed or any other thing? So what are our unplanned schedule changes? Those are things we can measure. Those are things we can count, and we can look at what the extent of that is. So was it something where we had a small schedule change, we got a delay, or we had to push something out, or we had to pull something in and switch things around? So those can actually be measured and counted. Freight costs, those are up and down on materials, equipment. We can track that we had planned this kind of freight budget and the actual costs were different. So companies can measure that sometimes. Lost sales from stoppages or shortages, or the impact of what it cost us to expedite to not lose that sale and get that delivered on time. Loss of market share, which is a harder number to measure, but our friends in marketing are good at that and looking at that all the time. And then our reputation, again, this is an area for marketing to track more than operations or supply chain, but we want to look at that and see what we can measure about that so that we can report this back to the business and that we can quantify this impact. Because if we can quantify the impact, then we can be better prepared, and then we can actually track it and figure out how to avoid that kind of impact in the future. So, other than throwing up your hands and saying, "Oh my God, this is bad," and I really don't recommend buying a crystal ball. If I had one, I might share it, but I don't, and I'm not in the market for one. So, there's things we can do as businesses, and I always say use the 4 R's. So, make sure that you're risk aware, make sure you have that throughout the supply chain. Uh, the first thing to do when you have a disruption is to really look at that assurance of supply and restore the assurance of supply as quickly as possible. Can we get some amount of product in here, whether we're expediting, whether we're doing some things internally like reworking or sorting or whatever? What can we do to restore that order as soon as possible and make sure that we can continue to produce in some fashion and make sure that we stabilize the cash flow as much as possible, because that's really important. So we also want to communicate and try to collaborate with customers and suppliers and say, we have a problem, Houston, we have a problem. How do we all work on this together to try to get a short-term solution and then some activities that we can take quickly to at least address, this is a triage thing. Stop um, put the more important things in line first and stop the flow if we can, to keep that flow of product going. So we want to stop the damage and try to resolve things as quickly as possible, put some preventive measures in place, and eventually take a longer term, take a breath, deep breath, lessons learned kind of thing, and put that in. But in the meantime, let's keep things going in some way, shape, or form. Then we want to rethink about what we're doing. So we want to say, what happened here? Define our capabilities, our capacities. We want to look at that in a proactive way now and say, think about where our vulnerabilities are in terms of capability and capacity. Capability is our processes, our abilities to produce things, and the capacity is how much we can do. So, are we limited by constraints such as no overtime or overtime ceilings, or do we work two shifts? Is that a possibility if we need extra capacity to open up another shift, or elongated shifts? So the amount of things that we can do within a production line, a shift, a per person, whatever, those are the capacity types. And then the capabilities is the range of things um, that we can do. Of course, we want to look at balancing the cost efficiency, the customer service, our resiliency with everything else, because we don't just want to pour money into something that we can't see the end of, but we want to make sure that we're as resilient as possible. And then, that might mean that we need to redesign our business or redesign some parts of our supply chain, redesign our strategies to achieve the goals, considering what we know, what we want to go, what we might be able to do. We want to, add in technologies like AI, if and as they apply, protect our strategic relationships with our suppliers as well as the customers. Make sure that we've got communication channels and we've got communication um, open. We know who's responsible for what against our product teams, our supply chain partners, all of the key stakeholders, that we have good communication lines that stay open. We want to make sure we have backup suppliers identified for those. We want to diversify our supply base so that we have those backup suppliers and that we have other sources of the capabilities and capacities that we need to keep our factories running. And then contingency stock. So this is, safety stock is not a bad word. A lot of companies say we want to be just in time, and that's great, but just in time doesn't apply to everything. And it's not out of the realm of reasonability to have some items in your inventory that are on a just in time model, whereas you have safety stock on other types of inventory because that is what is warranted due to the type of product that it is, the lead time it is, the criticality to your business, any number of things. But we want to be proactive about this, taking action as soon as we can, thinking about this ahead of time rather than just being in firefighting mode and responding to whatever. We want to minimize the disruptions that we have when and as we can. So again, communication is important for that, collaboration, contingency plans. We want these contingency plans in place with these dual sources, inventory, and whatever we can do. Because whatever we can do to reduce the risk, transfer the risk, share the risk with suppliers and customers, it's a better thing to do than to bring that all on our company and make us bear all that responsibility. So here's a model that I found from Everstream Analytics that I think is interesting, where it talks about visibility, and it talks about being proactive and being responsive, and against those two and those two perspectives. So we want to look at that in terms of visibility. So we want to quantify our strategic network. We want to map our suppliers and know where those key suppliers are for us as tier one, also for the tier two and tier three ones that are important to our business, or that our tier one suppliers tell us they're mapping and watching. It doesn't hurt to have a couple sets of eyes on that. Then we want to treat that visibility. The next thing is the flexibility. What happens when things happen unexpectedly? So we want to mitigate those. We want to have mitigation plans. We want to have backup plans. We want to understand our vulnerabilities and be prepared to deal with those. And ultimately, that will add value to our business. It will give us fewer disruptions. It will give us faster time to respond and to come back up, make us more resilient so that we can return to status quo more quickly. And then also it will lead to fewer of these events that are actually significantly impactful to us. We are never going to be in a position, any business, where you don't have little hiccups and little things that go wrong. But the fewer those are, the less impactful the better we're doing our job, and the higher our performance, and the better the contribution of the supply chain organization. So, what I know is risk awareness is the first key. That's the better way to do things is to be risk aware, to instill this value in and throughout the organization so that everybody is looking for risk. So, you're identifying that, you include that as part of your decision making. Um, Processes, you're looking at internal, external potential risks, and you're doing assessments. And the assessments are really looking at it in two different axes along the line of what's the probability of things happening, and then if that does happen, what is the impact? And so you want to do a kind of a low, medium, high type assessment, or more detailed if you have better information and your team is more used to looking at this. So when we talk about the risks, we say, does this have a high probability of occurring, or is this a low, not very likely that this will happen, or is this somewhere in between, or we really don't know? And that's a fair thing to say. So sometimes we don't have enough information to make that. But then at the same time, we're looking at how the probability, how impactful is this going to be? I always use my home here in Southern California. We have earthquakes here. There was a big earthquake off Northern California shore, 7 point something this week, 7.3, I think. But that's a big earthquake. So the probability that we have earthquakes here in Southern California is very high. The probability that hurricanes hit Florida over the course of a year is very high. But the impact ranges from negligible to devastating. So where are you on that continuum? Where are you on that spectrum? And talk about those different aspects. The building codes here in Southern California are very strict, and they have really enabled the whole entire Southern California area where that is rife with faults, both onshore and offshore, to absorb many, many earthquakes. We've had several earthquakes, not devastating ones around here, thankfully, but we have earthquakes um, frequently. So we've had some over the course of the last few months that we felt, and my husband and I are looking at each other and or running to find us in the other part of the house and saying, was that an earthquake? Or checking the online alert. But then the impact of that was negligible. We didn't have, anything knocked off a bookshelf or anything, even though we felt this earthquake. So the impact is typically pretty low to maybe a little medium. Now, that doesn't say that there is no possibility that there won't be a very large, devastating earthquake here, but the probability of that is lower than the more frequent, smaller ones. Same thing with fire, same things with hurricanes. I come from the Midwest and we had tornadoes. So all of these things you have to think about. And those are just kind of natural disasters. There's lots of other risks in your business that you want to look at. So again, get people to look for these on a proactive, regular basis. And then think about how you can integrate flexibility into your supply chain, into the organization, across all of your supply chain, from your lower level suppliers to your customers. So this is where you want to create this culture of flexibility in your organization, thinking about how we can be flexible, be resilient, respond to whatever happens, and then come back very strong very quickly. So you want to reward innovation, creativity, communication, talking about these things. Being prepared is the most important thing you can do, and not saying, oh, that's not important, that's not going to happen. Let's talk about those things. And then see what your response should be. Sometimes wait and see is an appropriate response. Sometimes it is not an appropriate response. So you want to look and say, what is that range? Again, it's a spectrum on how quickly do we react and take action, or do we continue to assess and look at things? One of the most important things you can do is when you get through one of these disruptions or shortages, you take a step back and you say, okay, what did we learn from that? What can we do differently next time? What did we do that worked well? What did we do that didn't work so well? And how might we change our response to the next disruption or shortage that we have. Talk about these things. Don't talk about them as a blame game, but talk about them as what can we learn from this and how can we position ourselves to be stronger and at the same time stronger and more flexible for the next disruption or shortage. So my model is for supplier management is really fourfold. I look at supplier performance, I look at relationship management, risk management, and the business fundamentals. In the case of disruptions and shortages, some of that comes from the supplier performance area where suppliers have issues. They are late, they have poor quality problems, they have issues in their supply chain that ultimately become our issues just because that's the way the supply chain flows. In order to get through those, we need good supplier management skills. We need to make sure that we have the relationship defined. We understand the difference between transactional and strategic relationships. And for each of those, we have ways to respond. It's all about managing the risk. So we have to look at that risk in terms of performance, in terms of supplier relationships, in terms of our business and the value that we add as supply chain professionals. And all of that resides in that business fundamentals quadrant where we have to have the right people, the right skills, the right knowledge in our organization that can manage that performance, understand those relationships, and have that foundation set so that when these risks do occur, we can respond. And the same business fundamental skills and knowledge that is assessing that risk all the time so that we respond the at an early stage, that we don't wait until something gets to be a devastating impact on our business before we take action, before we pick up the phone and call the supplier, or we pick up the phone and call another supplier or a manager and say, we need help with this because this is a problem. So this is my go-to model. This is what I espouse, and this is what I um, counsel my clients on how to improve this. So what's next is what stuff happens. So I want you to think about this and think about your last surprise, your last disruption or shortage. Do you know where your next one is coming from? Do you have a pretty good idea of where you're looking and you think you know what the next impactful um, disruption or shortage to your business is going to be? And then ask yourself, are you really ready for this? Is your company ready? Is your team ready for this? Because you might need support for this. If you need assistance, help is available. There are places to go to get help. And if you could use some outside support, I invite you to consider working with me. If you're impatient to get this started, we can talk about this. The first step could be a call with Jane. This is a free call, 30-minute call to talk about disruptions, shortages, talk about what you're doing and what's working, what's not, and how we might work together to improve your situation. So that's a free call. If you do that today in the next 24 hours to book a call with me, then I'll send you some information from my latest article and get you enrolled in my dynamic dialogue workshops. So there's where we can go. So now this is the last chance I'm going to give you to be a part of the drawing. So I'm going to get you the slides and you'll get it. You'll be subscribed to my dynamic dialogue webinars, which are once a month. They're on the fourth Thursday of the month, but we're not doing it this month because it's too close to Christmas. It would be on Christmas Eve, and that's nobody wants to hear about this stuff. Then I want you all to spend time with your family. But if you go to send me that email at jane@purplelink.co. That's Kathy put into the webinar chat. And if you do that, then I will spin my little random number generator here and see who is going to win our Amazon gift card for today. If you want the slides, please reach out. I'm happy to do them. Kathy records the webinar, and I think she puts it on her channel, so she can do that. So let me see here for just a second. I'll give you about 30 more seconds to do this. Whoops. And while I do that, I'm going to leave you with this strive to thrive because many businesses see this and say, what if we don't change and something magical just happens? And you can see in the background their profits are sinking, their sales are sinking, and maybe we don't have to change. Maybe we just keep doing what we've always done. That's probably not the right answer, and it probably um, takes a different approach. This is a different world that we're living in these days. So I have the winner, and it's Kara Kavanaugh. Kara, are you on still? If you are, then I need you to send me an email and let me know where I can send your, it's an Amazon gift card. So I need to know the email you want me to send that to, and I will get that sent out.
Yep, she's happy.
Great. Yeah. So that's what I have today. I'm going to end the slideshow now and stop sharing. And I'll take any questions, comments, or whatever.
Yeah, if anybody has any questions or comments, please put it in the chat for Jane. I do want to thank everybody for joining us today. We will get this posted probably a little bit later today, probably in a couple hours. You'll get an email from me, and the recording will be up there. And of course, we send our CEHs, and they also are located in your ISM accounts as well. But at this point, Jane, let me see if there's any comments. No, just a lot of thank yous. I did want to let everybody know that our next program is going to be on our next webinar, I should say, our Lunch and Learn will be on January 14th. If you want to mark your calendar for that, noon Eastern time as usual. And we'll be getting information out to everybody on that. But that'll more or less be on the predictions for 2025.
And happy holidays to everyone. Be safe.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And thank you again, Jane, for always coming back and coming to our chapter to give us the latest on whatever supply chain happenings are occurring at this time.
It's always my pleasure. And if you have topics that you think would be good webinar topics, you can always send those to me. I'm always looking for new ideas and different things to do. Keeps me sharp to do these. So I'm very happy to do that.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you, everybody, and again, have a great holiday season. See everybody soon.